Broadchurch was a series that originally ran for 3 series from 2013 to 2017, and it was written by Chris Chibnall and debuted on ITV. It would eventually get an American remake titled Grace Point that would also star David Tennant, released shortly afterwards. Now, when this series was on TV, it was in all the magazines, it was everywhere, and people were always talking about it, but I'll admit I kind of missed the boat on it. Like, I saw bits and pieces of it, but I didn't get around to watching the entire show. Well, I finally decided it was time. I bought it, I bought the first 2 seasons, I sat down, watched through season 1, and let me tell you, it's a long way from the TARDIS, because one of the things that originally drew my eye to this show was that it did involve a lot of Whoniverse actors, either ones who had been in the show before, or ones who would later go on to appear in Doctor Who itself. Ones that had already done it included David Tennant, Olivia Colman, Tracy Childs, Arthur Darvill, David Bradley, and some would later appear in Doctor Who later on, including Jodie Whittaker, Jonathan Bailey, and Jacob Anderson. But watching this through, as I said, it's a long way from the TARDIS, but unlike other crime procedurals that I've watched through, such as Castle, Bones, Lucifer, or iZombie, this one is a lot more serious. Like, those other shows, they all had a twinge of comedy about them. Like, they always had a comedic edge that kind of kept things light, whereas this one, you're full on watching a police investigation, and you're gonna feel sad for it. Like, these characters, as you learn more about them, you're gonna really kind of connect with them, and then when the end comes, you ultimately find out what everyone's been through. It's dark, but at the same time, it's really interesting to watch. So, for those who somehow missed the show or don't know what Broadchurch was about, here's a basic summary of the plot. Danny Latimer, a kid played by Oscar McNamara, when his family get up one day to go about their business, they find he's not there and assume that he was either out on his paper round, out going skateboarding, or left to get to school early. To which his mother, Beth Latimer, played by Jodie Whittaker, she didn't necessarily think anything of it at first, until she gets to school later that day to watch the sports day and finds her child isn't there. So she tries multiple times to call him just to find out where he is, and then it's reported that a body has been found on the beach. To which she rushes there, and it turns out her son has been killed. Now, while people think at first it's an accident because his body is found on the beach below a set of cliffs, the police later managed to find out that Danny was strangled before he died. They managed to find contusion marks around his neck, and so they work out that somebody murdered him. Now, the 2 people who are kind of mostly looking into his murder throughout the entire thing are Detective Sergeant Ellie Miller, played by Olivia Colman. Now, she and her family have just returned from a holiday in Florida, and she's a little bit miffed when she comes back to find out that the position that she had been up for has now been filled. And it's been filled by a man named Detective Inspector Alec Hardy, played by David Tennant. He's very much a house-style figure because he is shown to be having panic attacks, he's kind of very grumpy, he just wants to get the job done, and he's mostly fairly cold with everyone. For example, when at one point he and Olivia Colman are walking along, she goes, "Do you mind not calling me Miller? I mean, I don't like the whole surname thing." Like, really? Yeah, I mean, you could just call me Ellie. Ellie. No. Just... To which I do think that the 2 of them actually work really well together here. I mean, as I said, they are prior Doctor Who. David Tennant, of course, was the 10th Doctor for 4 years, or 5 years, and Olivia Colman would appear in Matt Smith's first episode as Prisoner Zero, or a version of Prisoner Zero, and the 2 of them, I do think, work really well together off each other. I mean, David Tennant is, of course, the gruff cop, the one who's kind of going through some kind of trauma. Basically, the setup that they give him is that he had previously been involved in another murder investigation in a town called Sandbrook. But the case ended up falling through, he was ridiculed, and so he's kind of moved here for a fresh start. and he's got himself wrapped up in another murder, and he's under pressure to kind of solve it through. Coleman, I do think, works really well with him, because while David presents this kind of side of the gruff, annoyed cop, she has a little more optimism, and I do think she balances off him really well. As I said, other characters who they encounter throughout the series, you've got the Chief Superintendent, Elaine Jenkinson, played by Tracy Childs, who had previously played Matella in Doctor Who, and she doesn't appear much. She only really appears at the beginning of the series, but she does well. There's also a reporter named Oliver Stevens, played by Jonathan Bailey, who would later appear in the Doctor Who episode Time Heist, playing Psy, who I think he's set up as Ellie's nephew, and most of the time he's kind of a member of the press, and Hardy's just kind of trying to push him away, going, look, this isn't the best time for the press to get involved. A family has just lost a child, and you want to flash it over the tabloids? No. There's also the Reverend Paul Coates, played by Arthur Darvill, who he presents well, the owner of a local shop, played by David Bradley, named Jack Marshall, and Beth Latimer, Jodie Whittaker. She also has a daughter, and she's got a boyfriend named Dean Thomas, played by future Doctor Director Jacob Anderson. And as they go through the series over time trying to solve the murder, you get to know each of these characters, and also the motives around them. Like, as the series progresses and you get to know each character, you also do get to see their motive as to why each of them would want to kill Danny. For example, it's discovered that Jodie Whittaker's husband in the series was having an affair, and it's a question of, did Danny find out, and did the father kill him to keep him quiet? And there's also Arthur Darvill's character of the Reverend, who they discover partway through is going to an Alcoholics Anonymous in another town, and he has known to be kind of aggressive with certain kids. And it's a question of also, did he kill him? And while I won't give anything away here as to who killed him and the like, some of them are quite tragic. Like David Bradley's character, the shop owner, they find out some dark stuff about him. The press finds out some dark stuff about him, and it gets pulled into the light. But then when you actually find out the entire story behind him, it's actually quite tragic. And even though he did some things in the past that, okay, could be considered bad, by the end of it, you really feel sorry for him, and it does really work. Anyway, other characters they encounter, that there's also Olivia Colman's son, Tom Miller, played by Adam Wilson, and it transpires that eventually he had been friends with Danny, but then something had happened to draw them apart, and he'd ended up sending some kind of threatening emails to him, and even then that's considered a motive. We've also got a member of the press, played by Vicky McClure, and a woman played by Pauline Quirk, who is kind of distrustful of everyone. But anyway, I've gone on enough about the cast here, so sorry if I'm going a bit rushed with this. But as I said, unlike other crime procedurals I've watched where they would usually solve the entire thing within one episode, this takes 8 episodes to finally reveal who killed Danny. And as you get to know the characters, you get to sympathise with them, see their points of view, and when the ultimate reveal comes about who did it and why they did it, it's actually quite tragic. And it is interesting to watch through. I mean, this is probably more like how police procedurals actually go in real life than how you see them in other TV shows. Just, it takes a long time, and it's devastating for them. Like, they focus a lot on Jodie Whittaker's character, Beth Latimer, and the family, and you can see how it affects them all. So just Beth is distraught, and when she finds out that she's pregnant, she's not immediately excited about it because she still holds a piece of Danny with her. And when she and her husband try to go to counselling to try and figure out where they go from here, she said, I want to be excited about the baby, but I'm still hung up on Danny. As I mentioned, the husband was having an affair, and they have to kind of grapple with that. They also have a teenage daughter who's having her own problems in that, one, she's now the older sister of her dead brother, and the other being that she has a boyfriend who is older than her, even though it's exactly the same thing her parents did. And she has to kind of grapple with that as well. And honestly, it goes on for. There's far too much in the first series for me to really explain here, but this was a show that I kind of missed when it was on TV, but having seen it now, I urge you, if you haven't seen it, just watch it at least once. It's, as I said, it's not like other crime procedurals where they might solve it within an episode. You gotta take the time with this one, but if you do, trust me, it's an experience to watch. I don't know if it's one that you'd watch kind of more than once every few years, but it's one that you really have to see to be believing in it. So there you go, there's my thoughts on the first season of Broadchurch. I might watch season 2 in time, but yeah, it's harrowing to watch through. Anyway, until next time, see ya.